Good morning. It is after midnight on Sunday, December the 3rd, 2023. I usually don't produce a video this late. However, I just got through from watching the championship games for college football. And I like college football better than even the NFL. That's just me personally. And tonight's topic is going to be about it's going to be a football topic, both about college, what the teams that I think should be in the playoffs, the college playoffs, and why, and also a topic about the NFL. But before I get started, I just want to welcome you to another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Okay, so we got through from watching Championship Sunday, and that's where teams basically had a chance to solidify, or not Sunday, I'm sorry, Championship Saturday, my apologies. Well, really Friday and Saturday, excuse me, Friday and Saturday, because Washington played Oregon. Oregon was in the top 10. They was, I think, the sixth best ranked team in the nation, while Washington was ranked third. And so Washington beat Oregon, and they beat them. Even though the score was close, the game really wasn't. Washington pretty much handled them for the majority of that game. So Washington is going to be in because Washington is undefeated. Michigan is going to be in because Michigan is undefeated, and those so those two teams are going to be in now because Michigan won their game today. Now that brings me to Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, Texas. Well, you have like a musical chairs here. Four teams competing for really two spots. All Georgia, which was the number one team in the nation, and arguably the toughest conference in the nation, the SEC, all Georgia had to do was to win their game. And it was a quasi home game because the game was played in Atlanta. And Georgia is not, compared to Alabama, Georgia, this was a home game for Georgia. So it was really a quasi home game, even though you could say the crowd might have been split 50-50, but really it's a home game. Anyway, all Georgia had to do was win the game and they would have been in, no questions asked. And then now you would have just had two teams competing for one final spot. But here's what happened. Alabama not only beat Georgia, but they outplayed them the whole game, or the majority of the game, 3/4 of the game. They outplayed them. They were the better team last night. And that's the problem. So then now, as usual, when those teams lose, they do some politicking. Nick Saban is famous for politicking, and he even did some of it last night when he said, well, we handled our business and we did what we were supposed to do. Excuse me, which he's technically correct. He is correct. They did what they were supposed to do. Georgia didn't. Now, if anybody from the SEC has a case for being in, it's really Alabama because Alabama beat Georgia, even though Georgia was the number one team. But Alabama beat Georgia. Alabama only got one loss. Now Georgia has one loss. But here's why: if I was running the committee and I was determining who gets into the playoffs and who doesn't, and this is the problem with that, rather than just allowing the team's record to determine whether they get in, and their seedings and all that in their divisions and stuff. It's a selection committee. So that means the committee selects who's in and who's out and what the matchups is, unlike the professionals. So since you're forcing me to select, and I'm going to start off by saying I'm a Georgia guy. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, from when I was a little kid, going visiting my aunt down in Savannah, Georgia during the summers. So I've always been a Georgia Bulldog fan. Well, that's one of my teams. And so you would think, well, I'm going to be biased to say Georgia should be in. Well, Georgia should have been in had Texas not did what they did, had Florida State not did what they did. But I can't put real, I can't justifiably put Georgia over Alabama. If someone from the SEC has to get in, I'm going to, being that all things were equal, Alabama only had one loss going into the game. It's not like both teams were undefeated. Okay? Alabama only had one loss going into the game. Their one loss was to Texas. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. And no matter how ugly Alabama might have been throughout the season, how can I punish them for beating Georgia and handing Georgia their first loss? How am I going to say, well, Georgia, you get in, but Alabama doesn't, even though even though Alabama just not only beat you, but won the conference championship. So it would be difficult. So this leaves me with a dilemma. If I put Alabama in, or if I put Georgia in, I got to put in Alabama too. That's the fairest way to do it. But does two SEC teams deserve to be in? I don't think so. So, but if I put in Alabama, well, what happens with Florida State? Do I punish Florida State, who just won their conference championship and also is undefeated? I don't think that's right and fair. Oh, and I just used the F word. That's a curse word. I don't like using the word fair because life isn't fair, but I don't think it's right. I think it's an injustice to leave Florida State out, to punish them because you didn't like the way they won. It's not about liking the way they won. It goes back to what a coach who I happen to like once said, and he used to coach my team, the Jets, and when he made this famous statement, hello, you play to win the game. And at the end of the day, they won the game. So do we punish them because, oh, we didn't like the way you won? Oh, you won with a third string quarterback. They won the game. And it would be a travesty to punish them for winning, because they didn't win the way you wanted them to. Never mind that Georgia, it wasn't like Georgia was that impressive or was blowing everybody out during the season. They won a couple of close games where they didn't play all that well. And the same can be said for Florida State. I mean, not for Florida State, for Alabama. So then, where does this leave Texas? Well, the problem is Texas only got one loss, have only one loss, and they beat Alabama early in the season. I don't care if it was whether it was early, mid, or late. They beat Alabama. So is it justifiable for me to say, well, let me put Alabama in, but leave Texas out when they won the head-to-head matchup? I thought the whole purpose of head-to-head matchup is, all things being equal, head-to-head is the tiebreaker, and it should be. I beat you when it mattered. So I can't justifiably keep Texas out, and I cannot justifiably keep Florida State out. And since Michigan and Washington is already in, my final four would be, and not necessarily in this order, but Michigan, Florida State, Washington, and Texas. That would be my four. The right thing to do would be to keep both Alabama and Georgia. And I'm a Georgia guy. But the right thing to do would be to keep both of them out. That would, number one, prove it's not the SEC Invitational. And my cousin said, well, really, it's the Alabama Invitational, because they're always trying to get Alabama in there, and that is true. But if you want to prove that this is just not about the SEC, the best thing to do is, since Georgia didn't handle their business, well, neither one is in. Because it's not right to punish Florida State or Texas because they're not in the SEC. But that's what you will be doing. Now, if I had to guess, and the selection takes place around noon today on the 3rd, if I had to guess what the committee's going to do, Florida State and Texas is going to be the two odd teams out. They're going to be the ones who drew the short straw. If I had to guess, so if I'm guessing, it'll be Alabama, Michigan, Washington, and Georgia. And I don't know what order, but it's going to be in one of those four. I believe that's going to be the four. And to me, it should not be, but I believe that's what's going to happen. If I had to venture or to guess what I think it'll be. Now, this brings me to my next topic. And I was going to wait to talk about it, but since I'm already on, I might as well throw it in here. It's in regards to the media giving false narratives and basically telling lies. And basically, what's the word I'm looking for? They're giving you false narratives as to how things really is. Let me give you an example, and we're going to leave it at the sports area. I'm not going to get into politics or non-sports. I'm going to just leave it on sports here, and really on the NFL in particular. See, they want to tell you that, oh, the young quarterbacks coming in the league would be better served with an offensive minded or or head coach who comes from the offensive side of the ball. And I'm gonna tell you why that's the biggest bunch of malarkey that there is out there. I'm trying not to curse, so I'm trying to keep it PG or PC, whatever word you want to use. Um, but it's the biggest bunch of malarkey out there, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because the quarterback doesn't really deal directly with the head coach. The quarterback, this is the first thing. The quarterback really deals with his position coach, which is the quarterback coach, and the offensive coordinator. So whether the head coach comes from the offense, the defensive side of the ball, or the special teams side of the ball, he's got a quarterback coach and an offensive coordinator. So that's who the quarterback is technically dealing with. He's not really dealing directly with the head coach. So that's the first problem with that argument. Here's the so it's not like, oh, the head coach is holding back the offense. I mean, holding back the quarterback. No. If you got a good offensive coordinator and good quarterback coach, that quarterback is going to thrive. If you have a bad one, well, they're going to struggle. That's just the way it works. Now, here's another reason why it's nonsensical and a bunch of malarkey. Because if it was about hiring an offensive-minded guy, well, let's just see how two recent examples of how that blew up in an owner's face big time. And both decided that, oh, they wanted to go on the offensive side of the football. A couple of years ago, the Raiders fired John Gruden because of scandals. They didn't want to fire him, but they were forced to because of scandals of his own making. But nonetheless, they fired him. And Steve Bisaccia, I think that's how you pronounce his name, so forgive me if it's not pronounced correct, but he was the special teams coach. He took over the team the rest of the way, and he helped them win games and helped them get into the playoffs. Well, the players wanted him to be hired permanent. But Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, decided, no, I want another offensive-minded coach like John Gruden. So what he went and got, he did, he went and hired Josh McDaniels, the same Josh McDaniels who drafted Tim Tebow in the first round, knowing the good well that man couldn't throw a football. And two, even more egregiously, a few years later, when he had a chance to take the Indianapolis job with Coach Andrew Luck, he decided at the last minute after accepting the job, he decided at the last minute to turn it down and leave them in the lurch the way he did. Which showed you his character, his true. Well, you went and hired him only to 2 years later, giving him the door, showing him the door. But I thought it was supposed to be about offensive-minded coaches. Well, he's offensive-minded. What happened? the team was lousy offensively. Then that brings me to another team who's owned recently, a new owner by the name of David Tepper bought the Carolina Panthers back a few years ago. And excuse me. And what happened was he hired Matt Rule out of college. I wouldn't have done it, but he did, and he paid a premium to do so, only to fire him about 3 years later. Um, then he allowed Steve Wilkes, who was the defensive coordinator at the time, to become the temporary head coach. And what did Steve Wilkes do his last 12 games? He went 6-6, which means he stabilized the franchise. Only and the team and the media and everybody down there in Charlotte wanted him to get the job and said he deserves to be the full-time head coach, which he did, considering the mess he took over. But what did you do? What did David Tepper do? Nah, I want an offensive guy. He when he got Frank Wright, only for you to fire Frank Wright 11 to 12 games into the season. What happened to the so-called offensive guy with the young quarterback? So that's nonsensical. Not only that, if you look around the league, scoring and offense is down across the board. Patrick Mahomes is arguably, not arguably, he's having the worst season of his career statistically. And this is the same unit and team, with the exception of two people, but this is the same unit and team that just won the chip, the Super Bowl, a year prior. So you can't say, well, he don't have no receivers. Well, he didn't have no receivers last year, and yet he found a way to win the Super Bowl. So it's more to it than just he don't have no receivers. I think that's lazy analysis. Okay, but across the league, offenses is down this year. But yet you got all these so-called now offensive-minded coaches. So what offense don't you think offense should be up? But it isn't. Then you then take into account that you look at a team like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is struggling offensively. Outside the Jets, they may have the second worst offense in the league. I would argue the Jets have the worst offense in the league. Um, and I'll make a video about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers another time. But Pittsburgh have arguably the second worst offense in the league. Yet, look at their record. They have a winning record with a defensive-minded head coach. So it doesn't matter what side of the ball the head coach really comes from. Not really. You either have a good head coach or you don't, or you have a bad or you have a bad head coach. So you either have a good head coach or you have a bad head coach. And what side of the ball he comes from doesn't really matter. It's either he's really good at what he does or he isn't. Okay? And here's another thing that the media likes shoving down our throats. They're inconsistent when it comes to how they evaluate quarterbacks. I'll give you a perfect example. Because if you listen to the narrative that surrounds, let's take Trevor Lawrence. And this is in no way am I bashing Trevor Lawrence. I am a fan of Trevor Lawrence. I like him, and I believe he's a really good quarterback. However, some people call him the prince that is Nick Wright. Others will tell you, that he's a superstar or an elite quarterback. He's not elite. He's good, but he's not elite. Um, they'll sing high praises to him. But when you really look at his stats is comparable to another player. So you got Trevor Lawrence here, and then you got player X here. And before I give you his name, I'm going to say to you that up to today, the completion percentage is similar, very close, or negligible. The yards, yes, Trevor has more yards because he's played in more games this year than player X. The completion percentage, negligible. It's about the same. Touchdowns, near the same. You see where I'm going with this? Quarterback rating, near the same. So you would say, well, okay, who's this player X? Now, before I tell you who this player X is, I'm going to mention one more stat. And now this is where there is a difference. And so I'm just going to be totally transparent. See, wins is not a quarterback stat. Wins and losses is not a quarterback stat. But I'm going to tell you what is a quarterback stat. Winning games with the game on the line. Game-winning drives with the game on the line. Do you win a tie and win the game, or I mean, win the game, or do you lose the game when you have the ball last with the chance to win? That it really is a quarterback stat. And if we take into account both of the Trevor Lawrence been in the league for 3 years, player X has been in the league for 3 years, so they both been in the league for the same period of time. Well, Trevor Lawrence has 8 game-winning drives where ball A with a chance to win the game, ball in his hands, he would have got the job done. Player X, only 3. And he only had 1 this season. So you'll say, but so it's like a 2-to-1 ratio, just a little bit above 2-to-1 ratio. So you'll say, okay, who's this player X? But yet he's considered not a bust. He's not a bust, but he's not considered to be very good. Yet they praise Trevor Lawrence as if he is good. And that player X is Justin Fields. Just go and look it up. Their stats are very similar, except that Trevor Lawrence does throw for more yards. But again, that makes sense because he's played in more games. Okay. Um, but what is funny is he's played in more games, but he got the same amount of passing touchdowns. And I'm not including rushing touchdown or rushing yards and nothing like that because that's an unfair comparison. But if you do both, it's an unfair comparison. No, just passing. You know, I wanted to see what the stats look like. Now that brings me to Justin Herbert. And also, I don't want to seem like I'm bashing Justin Herbert. I'm a fan of Justin Herbert. I think he's every bit as talented as Joe Burrow, who came out of that class that he was in, as well as Tua Tagliolova, so how you pronounce his name. And I don't mean to mispronounce it, but Tua T, as I like to call him. He's every bit as talented, if not more so, than both of them. But the reason why he's talked the least of the three, because his winning percentage is low. Now the media wants to make 1,000,001 excuses for him. Oh, the head coach is no good. Oh, this is no good. Oh, that's no good. Oh, he has a lot of injuries around him. There's always some excuse when it comes to Justin Herbert. But when it comes to a player like Justin Fields, well, he's not getting it done. Okay? Or you know, elite players overcome their circumstances, but yet that does not apply to Justin Herbert. I just find that very curious and very funny. So this is what I mean by the media either telling lies or what they're doing is they're giving you misinformation, or what they're doing is they're giving you a narrative that's not really true. And that's one of my biggest problems with this is why you have to really watch the games yourself to see. You can't trust what you're hearing from the media because they have a way of making you think one guy's good and the other guy is not so good when both have similar numbers or close enough to be similar. So, you know, but that's just my rant for today. I'm getting ready to go to bed because I'm a little sleepy. Not a little, I'm very sleepy. Um, and so, but I just wanted to get that out, about what I think should happen in the playoffs, the college playoffs, what I think should happen, what I think will happen. Again, let me rephrase, or let me reiterate. What I think should happen, it should be Texas, Michigan, Florida State, and Washington. Those should be the 4 teams in the postseason, in the playoffs. That's really the right and the fair. Oh, I just used the F word again. That is the right and the just thing to do. And darn it, I'm gonna just come out and say it's the fair thing to do. Yes, yes, I just cursed. It's the right, just, and fair thing to do. Okay, those four are the most deserving to be in the playoffs. Georgia and Alabama, not so, not so much. Well, here's what I think will happen. It will be Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Texas. That's who I think will be the four. I mean, Washington, I'm sorry. Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Washington. Sorry. Those will be the four, and the two that's going to be left holding the bag, even though it's not deserving so, would be Texas and Florida State. Those are going to be the two left holding the bag the way I believe this might play out. All right. I want to thank you for watching another segment of Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. If you like it, please leave a comment and hit that subscribe button or the thumbs up. Just let me know whether you like it or not. If you don't, then hit the thumbs down. Um, I don't. I mean, I believe that you can't help but like it because I'm Jermaine, and hey, if I produce it, you gotta like it. I'm just joking, but no. But if, I mean, just yes, just let me know what you think about it, and see you another time.